Hey, sometimes the obvious isn't so obvious. In response to several requests recently, I wanted to make a point of discussing load-bearing stresses on your camera, whether that be Nikon, Fujifilm, or Canon. You see this neat little thing on the bottom of this huge lens, the 200, 500 millimeter. This isn't that huge of a lens. It's not a 500 millimeter f4 or 600 millimeter f4. Tripod slash monopod mount, or the actual lens color. Interestingly enough, when camera manufacturers stick this on the lens, what that actually means is like, hey, this is a point where I could attach a monopod or a tripod. No! What this actually means on your lens is that the camera manufacturer is telling you, hey, we make really great cameras, but that lens is so huge that we are indicating to you that that is the point of stress transference, of load transfer for your system, that being that huge lens and the camera that you're actually using. A lot of people don't realize that while the mount is strong on your Canon, Nikon, and Fujifilm, whether that be chrome-plated brass or nickel-plated steel, depending on the mount and who makes it, the actual stress to the magnesium chassis, fracture, stress, accumulative stress to the magnesium chassis, bringing the mount out of parallel plane with the sensor, and stress to the actual threads, which are not that deep of a threads, and depending on the mount, between 4 and 6 different screws, will cause the mount to pull away from the camera, and once you destroy the actual magnesium threads, or depending on the case of the camera, like on the center section on like the D500 and some other cameras, or carbon fiber or polycarbonate, pull away from the camera, yeah, you got serious issues. So this is not a tripod slash monopod mount for your camera. It's an indication from your camera manufacturer that this is where they want you to transfer the load stresses to your camera system. This is a Nikon D4 and a 7200. This is actually, while there's no specific indication for that, the actual 70 to 200, 2.8, regardless of manufacturer, they're all pretty much the same weight roughly, is about the maximum allowable free hanging weight that anyone would tell you that knows what they're talking about to allow dangle from your camera. When it occurs above the 70 to 200, here, for example, the 100 to 400 millimeter Fujifilm, a 400 millimeter f4, a 500 millimeter f4, a 300 millimeter 2.8. Oh my God, a really huge lens of which I have several. 200 to 500 millimeter Nikkor. Yeah, no. You see, once you actually start mounting a camera to your lens rather than mounting a lens to your camera, this is what we call load and stress issues. Yeah. That free hanging weight will actually damage the magnesium chassis, bring the mount out of parallel with the sensor. Yeah, and it will strip the threads of the mount that are actually, a lot of cameras. This is also too why you should never ever travel with a lens mounted on your camera. Now, if it needs to be quickly accessible for taking images, that's another thing, but you never travel with a lens mounted on your camera. Every 4 or 5 months, Petapixel will post an article of some idiot that is flying and he's got like a 400 millimeter whatever mounted onto the camera, and of course it's roughly handled, and they end up snapping the lens right off the camera mount. If perchance you notice that once you mount your camera to a certain huge lens, it looks like a pit bull mastiff is trying to copulate with a tiny Pomeranian as far as analogously, yeah, that means you should never let that lens ever, not even for a second, dangle off the front of your camera. If your lens and camera looks like a Canon is trying to hump a wart, you don't want that lens to dangle freely off of your camera, unless you want to actually destroy your camera, destroy the mount. Yeah, cause stress fractures, bring the actual... Do you have any cameras are sent back? Like, there's something wrong with this camera. What did you do? It's like, well, I bought this big lens and I want to show you. Oh, did you let the lens dangle? Oh yeah, I did. How did you know that? Because the actual magnesium chassis is bent and the actual focal plane is brought out of parallel with the sensor, and people wonder why the images with all their lenses seem to have an issue. They're always out of focus on on the top part of the image. You see, because the actual sensor, the bottom part of your sensor is where the actual top part of your image is. Bottom part of the sensor is top part of the image. Yeah, this is probably so. Yeah, that's not a tripod and monopod attachment. That is an indication from the manufacturer that this is where they want the total of the system, meaning camera and lens, the load to be transferred to. Okay? You see, you got a tiny lens. This is the load point right there on the bottom of the camera. You stick a huge ass lens on your camera? No. The load point of the system, camera lens, needs to be transferred to the tripod collar. That's what the manufacturers mean by putting that on their huge lenses. Yeah, it's to keep your camera from being destroyed. You'd think this would be kind of obvious, but apparently it's not all that obvious. My face is a little sunburned, isn't it? Thanks. Bye.